So today we're going to go out to the Skelligs, they're a very famous island, and you can just about see them there in the background. And they're basically just bare rock, and we're going to go out there now with a boat. I hope you join me in this video, and we're going to have a look. As you journey out to the island, the first thing you of course realize, because it takes about 45 minutes to get there, is how rough the sea actually can be even on a sunny day. And that's because of the current in those areas is quite rough, because you're going against the waves as you're going out towards the island. But rest assured, you will actually have a lovely ride back, because you'll be going with the waves on the way back. Now, the first thing you realize is that, of course, monks have been living on the island for over 1,000 years, and you soon wonder how did they actually manage to even establish a actually monastery there in the first place. And that is because, not like us, we have modern boats. They had actually curraghs, which were made out of nothing more than hazelnut branches, some rope, and of course a bit of either rawhide or canvas. And they must have been brave indeed to go all the way out there and actually just establish the first steps of their monasteries many years ago. So when they first went out there, of course, the main thing that struck them or drew them out there was the idyllic settings and the kind of serene landscapes, and of course in a kind of quiet space that they could establish to live out their lives there in solitude and peace and prayer. These brave settlers actually managed to set up a monastery on the island and, do it for almost on and off over 1,500 years. So how did they actually manage to do it? How did they actually manage to survive?
Presumably when they first came here, they would have had to terrace the ground up here to make it level for their buildings. And of course they took nearly all of the stone that they used from this area and also from the area up behind. And they had to build a huge outer walls to hold everything in place. And it seems that with the building of these outer walls, they quite deliberately created a sort of a mini climate for themselves, so that the monastery is usually the most sheltered part of the island. And that happens because the winds that blow in from the sea are actually deflected by the outer walls, so that they go harmlessly up above, creating a very sheltered area here. And you will notice that when you go outside the last entranceway, you'll feel the wind blowing very strongly up the hillside again. And sometimes on stormy nights you can come up here and you can hear the roar of the sea slightly distanced by the walls, and you can hear the wind blowing very strongly outside. But here there can sometimes be a lot of shelter and a lot of calm here in the monastery. So that seems to have been quite deliberate. Also, of course, they didn't build right on top, so they were sheltered from the north winds by the lip of the island behind us there. And it seems that the outer terrace out there appears to be designed as a garden. Once again, it's very sheltered out there, and the walls actually concentrate the sunlight. The whole monastery faces roughly south-southeast. And we did a little experiment out there one year, and we grew vegetables all along one side, and we were interested to find that actually they grew extremely well, because the soil is very fertile on the island, surprisingly, and actually the climate is very mild once you have shelter. So that would have been a great source of food for them, at least during the summer months. And of course, we don't have actual evidence from there, but it is known that early monasteries of the same period grew early forms of peas and beans, early forms of the cabbage family, and early root vegetables. And so those would be all things that could be grown out here. And we grew the modern forms, and they all did very well. day-to-day life was probably very hard here. Everybody in those days was limited to the resources of the landscape where they were living. So it's very likely that the monks on the Skellig here had to work very, very hard to harvest the resources of the island. They probably ate a lot of fish. They would have also harvested the thousands of seabirds that live here in the summer months, so those would be good source of food. Also, they might have had small numbers of sheep or of goats or possibly of chickens. The monastery looks very tidy now, but in those days there would have been a fire lighting in perhaps one or two of the cells, and this large cell here is probably among the older group of cells, and it's probably the community cell where they cooked and ate together. And most of the cooking in a place like this would have been done over a fire. And it's quite possible that they removed the capstone of that building to allow smoke out from the fire inside. Then perhaps, sparing fuel, there might have been a fire in one or two of the other cells. Then they would be working hard to preserve food for the winter, so they would have smoked fish or the other meat, or they would have preserved it by burning seaweed and using the salt procured from that to preserve it again for the winter months. So summer was the good time for everybody in those days, and winter would have been quite difficult, perhaps even more difficult here on the Skellig.